The topic of the section 3 is Asian solidarity with the Rohingya survivors. Let me introduce a moderator for these sessions. A moderator is Yeon-sik Byun, chairperson of the Korean House for International Solidarity from South Korea. Please welcome them.
안녕하세요. 인권과 평화를 위한 국제민주연대 변연식입니다. Okay, I'm Regina Byun from Korean NGO working for peace and human rights issues. Its name is Korean House for International Solidarity. So I feel today this room looks like exactly like the name of our organization, International Korean House for International Solidarity. 오늘 강주에서 멀리서 오신 수녀님들도 제가 점심시간 후에 뵀거든요. 너무 감동이고요. 반갑습니다. 또 더 멀리서 오신 분들도 계시겠죠. 그래서 함께 이렇게 연대를 위해서 모여주셔서 감사하고요. So this session's theme 3 is the Asian solidarity with the Rohingya survivors. So we have the 4 speakers from US, and then 2 from Taiwan, and 1 from South Korea. So first speaker is Kim Mayung, writer and civil rights lawyer from USA. Let me briefly explain, introduce her.
I can get to the page if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kim Mayung is a U.S. coordinator for the Free Rohingya Coalition. She has practiced American civil rights, immigrant rights, and education law for over 15 years, including most recently at the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and currently works in civil rights policy and enforcement for New York State. She has written about the Myanmar's Rohingya genocide in the Huffington Post and the Buddhist blog Lion's Roar, and it is her goal to promote a balanced and fair narrative based on fact and reason about that crisis, as well as about the civil rights and the ethnic justice in Myanmar more broadly. In addition to the Huffington Post, her writing has appeared in the New York Times, San Francisco Chronicles, and etc. other outlets. Ms. Ung was born in Yangon, Myanmar, and is a Buddhist of Burma and Rakhine descent. She left Myanmar as a child, immigrated to the United States via Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and gave up primarily in the San Francisco, and grew up primarily in the San Francisco Bay Area. Okay.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with so many people who've done so much important work on gender and human rights and on the Rohingya human rights issues specifically. And so I know my bio's been read, but I wanted to share a little bit about my background and what brings me to this work around the Rohingya crisis, as well as around ethnic solidarity efforts and ethnic and racial oppression in Myanmar. I know I'm on the panel about kind of Asian solidarity, and I think that the perspective that I represent is of kind of progressive Burmese Buddhist diaspora and Burmese Buddhists in the country, country who are in solidarity with the Rohingya and other ethnic minorities in the country. And for me, as you heard from my bio, I left Myanmar as a small child. I left when I was 4. I grew up abroad, and my perspective of racial and social justice issues comes from my upbringing in the United States, where I am a person of color and an immigrant, albeit someone that immigrated as a young age. But I've always seen myself as a racial and religious minority, as a Buddhist in the United States. And so out of that, I became a civil rights lawyer working on issues affecting the Asian American community in the United States and around immigrant rights more broadly. And that is the spirit at which I've always approached the crisis in Myanmar as somebody that has always been in the minority, but who kind of for the first time in a civil rights crisis is positioned in the majority perspective. And so through my past work, as well as through previous presentations at these conferences, for those of you who've attended some of our other ones, I've attempted to kind of present and humanize and explain, without letting off the hook, the Burmese Buddhist perspective, to explain what is behind that. And in the past, I've focused on kind of broader themes like colonialism and the legacies of colonialism, as well as the rise of Buddhist nationalism, starting with the military era in the 60s and culminating now. For this presentation today, because our focus is specifically on gender issues and sexual violence, I took a different approach at looking kind of more broadly at how women are often framed in both my country of origin, Myanmar, as well as my country of destination, the United States, at moments of civil rights struggles, and how access to women in racially and socially diverse countries can become framed as a point of power. And this can be access by men to women via consent in the form of marriage, as well as through force and rape. And especially in times of social turmoil and change, specifically that access to women, both minority women and majority women, however framed, can be symbolic of power and control in this society by men, where women, whether women in the racial or ethnic majority or minority, are framed specifically in relation to their relationship to men. And so I want to start with a story. Usually I start with stories about my country of origin in Myanmar. I want to start today with the story about from American history, in my country of destination, where throughout our history, we have had moments where there's been fear that men of color, and specifically black men, will take, will either rape white women or marry them and create mixed-race children, which will ultimately outnumber the white American community and destroy the white culture, the perceived white essence of the United States. And up until about 50 years ago, interracial marriage was actually illegal in much of the US, in many states, and the races were largely kept separate. And so this fear that of men of color, and specifically black men, taking and raping or marrying white women has been used to justify violence against black men and men of color. And so this is something that I've been thinking about both as I was preparing for this presentation, as well as hearing the presentations this morning, because this is something that's also very similar to the dynamics in Myanmar of how Rohingya women are framed in relation to the broader Burmese society, as well as how the fear of Rohingya men taking, or generally non-Buddhist men taking, raping, or marrying Burmese Buddhist women is seen as a threat to the essential character of Burmese society. So there's a major fear in Myanmar that Rohingya specifically and Muslims more generally will one day outnumber the Burmese Buddhist population. And in Burma, the national identity is very much tied around the Buddhist identity as well as the identity of the majority group, the Bama, which are about 60% of the population. Statistically, any of this is very unlikely in the future. The country is about 90% Buddhist, and there's about 4% Muslim, including but not limited to the Rohingya, and then the remaining 6 or 7% are Christians, predominantly from some of the different ethnic minorities like the Kachin and the Chin and the Karen that we've been talking about. So this is a very unlikely scenario. And Rohingya women having children and raising a family is sometimes referred to as breeding, a term commonly used to refer to animals. The Rohingya, as we've heard this morning, are profoundly dehumanized and likened to unwanted pests and vermin like snakes and rats. And this is something I've seen in the media, as well as disturbingly in my own life among Burmese Buddhists that I know in my community and my family in Burma to some extent. And in this framing, the Rohingya women's perceived childbearing ability and fertility and perceived fertility defines them as an essential threat to Burmese Buddhist society, and becomes some things to be controlled and dominated. There's also a fear of Rohingya and non-Buddhist men taking Buddhist women. In 1915, Buddhist nationalists successfully lobbied for the passage of the Buddhist women's special marriage law, which creates bureaucratic hurdles for Buddhist women in Myanmar to marry non-Buddhists. Basically, there needs to be an application to the government and a chance for others to object to that. And it has its basis actually, or as a basis for it, the nationalists refer back to old colonial era laws that were meant to protect Buddhist women's property should they marry out. But this is now being used to control or create hurdles for marriage by consent by Burmese Buddhist women to non-Buddhists. The threat of taking Buddhist women by rape and violence is also been a theme. As most of you know, the current Rohingya crisis took momentum in 2012 when there was a report of a rape by a Rohingya man, or 3 Rohingya men of a Burmese Buddhist or a Rakhine Buddhist woman, which was later used to begin the incarcerations that we've now seen in the camps in Rakhine State, as well as leading to violence against, intercommunal violence between Muslim and non-Muslims in Burma, in Rakhine State, as well as other places. And while the truth of specific incidences can be hard to confirm, it's known that the Burmese military has used Facebook and other social media to spread false narratives or exaggerate stories to get social support. And so in this part of the narrative, this is the framing of Buddhist women, right? It's access to Buddhist women, whether by consent in marriage or by rape, that's framed as a PowerPoint as well. So both of these framings of the Rohingya women and the Buddhist women are used to justify the very real rape and sexual violence against Rohingya women that we've been hearing about today. And it's worthwhile to note that it has also presented today that these are the same tactics that have been used for decades against other ethnic minority women in Burma as well. So it is, as Rahima pointed out in her presentation, very much a strategic, tactical attempt to use sexual violence as a form of social control to destabilize the Rohingya community, make it less likely that they'll return, and indeed for the basically Burmese Buddhist men to assert control and power over the men and women of other communities through the sexualized violence against women. And so this is, something that for me, as a Burmese Buddhist, it's profoundly disturbing. And hearing stories like we have throughout the day and at these conferences that I've attended, it has been and will always be profoundly disturbing. I think what's been an interesting journey for me has been to be in that, to hear those stories as a member of the majority group, which is a very different perspective for me as someone who's grown up as an immigrant and a person of color in the United States. But what I've been trying to do as I've been doing this work for the last couple of years, because previously I focused exclusively on domestic civil rights issues in the United States, has been to think about how I would want my white friends in the United States to be a good ally. Like, what's the best thing that I can do? And I find that sometimes, and this is just a broad, like, this is, I by no means am I trying to apply that this is the majority, white perspective, but I do find that when you encounter and try to engage white people in my country about racial justice issues, sometimes there's a discomfort to talk about these issues, and a defensiveness, a guilt, a desire to kind of bury it as something that's in the past. And I think that as a Burmese Buddhist, I think it is really important for our community within the country as well as globally to recognize and address and speak about it and not let any feelings of guilt or shame or horror because it's being perpetrated by our community to prevent us from talking about it. Because as it's been interesting in this conference to make the comparisons to the Korean comfort women from many years ago, and I think that it's very clear from the presentations today that this has happened throughout history, the use of genderized violence against women in conflicts as well as for social control, and it's only through addressing it, both men and women, people who are in the perpetrating group to the extent that there's an ethnic or racial element, people that are in the victim group, to address these issues, to look at them, to examine them, to talk about them, and indeed remember them years later. Talking about the Rohingya crisis, there's been many waves of exoduses outside of the country where they've been allowed back in and pushed out again, and these cycles keep repeating in our country and in other places, and it's only by addressing these issues together as men and women, minority, majority, that we'll get anywhere in preventing it from happening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your detailed and vivid presentation. Okay, next speaker, Tu from Taiwan. Dr. Teresa Delanye. She's a professor and director of Center for Population and Gender Studies, National Taiwan University, and chair of Taipei Women's Rescue Foundation. And Yue Chung Wei, he is also director of Taipei Women's Rescue Foundation. You will use the 15 minutes together. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for inviting us here, all the organizers. Thank you very much. We are from the Taipei Women's Rescue Foundation. First, I would like to call your attention back to one historical moment. That is immediately after the end of the Second World War, on the shore of the Marseille, and the French people receiving the US troops asking this question: how come you Americans do not bring your own women? Let's come back to Asia. The Japanese troops never brought their own women, very rarely. And they took the women from their colonies, like Korea, like Taiwan, later Philippines, Indonesia, China, the places they occupied through the military forces, and they trafficked those women to different regions to serve as military resources to stabilize their men's morale and to restore and to secure their fighting capability. This is an institutionalized state violence against women. We at the organization in Taiwan, we serve all the women suffered from sexual violence, from domestic violence, children witnessing domestic violence, and also digital violence victims nowadays. And of course, the so-called comfort women is one of our major tasks. Starting from 1992, we identified 59 self-reported women identified as the so-called comfort women, served in the Second World War, Japanese sexual slavery. And the estimate number should be 2,000, according to a lot of historical records, but only less than 60 came forward. You can see how much pressure they faced. They try not to identify themselves, even though our government provided compensations and our organization provided a lot of workshop services and everything. They just don't want to come forward. So my respect to all the Burmese women who would like to come forward and to tell us what happened to them. In Taiwan, this is a very difficult thing. And in 1996, the United Nations identified those women as military sexual slavery in wartime. They are the victims, but our story today is not only about victims. Our story to share with all of you is about their recovery, their resilience, and the final peacemaking toward the end of their lives. Till today, only 2 women left with us. And we have strategies for their peacemaking process, not only with themselves, but with the society, with the aggressor, although it hasn't been achieved, as you may know, and their peacemaking with the future. This is what our organization has been doing for the past 25 years. And we're glad here to share these strategies with you. And also we hope that our human rights defenders in this room can stand on our shoulders and move forward. Please, we are here at your service. And the next part of the presentation will be conducted by the director of our research section, Mr. Yo.
Thank you, and good afternoon. And I will start my introduction from the recovery workshops, and we run the recovery, long-term recovery workshop from 1996 to 2012. And also the experience is also important to us because we found that to talk about protection of victims, most people recognize or put emphasis on the short and urgent needs of the victim. But once we talk about the long-term service, especially Dr. Ye mentioned, we also serve the domestic violence victims. They shows the same syndromes like cancer women, like AMAs, we have service before. So during the investigation start in 1992, our workers found that many mental and physical problems AMA had faced has experienced for decades. So such a syndrome like physical issues and insomnia, fear of betrayal, helpless, isolation, and stigma and the self-blaming. So these syndromes are not only because they suffer from the sexual violence, but also suffer from they faced the society, the social denial, and the victim blaming society. So once we realize that they are not only the sexual violence victims, they are also aged women. So our workers and these workshops are designed to deal with the reintegration, the traumatized experience, and their caring and well-being in real life. So this supportive group and workshops for Taiwanese AMA targeted to ease their feeling of isolation, humiliation, and disorder, and to recognize the rearranged and traumatized experience. So AMA regularly get together during this period and share their experience in this session of the workshop, and close friends, social workers, and counselors accompanying with AMA. So I will show some pictures that this page. I will show some pictures of the workshop. Like this workshop is a yoga workshop in 2002, and various therapy methodology we have used in these workshops. So like art therapy, and drama therapy, photography therapy, and this picture, this butterfly, was taken by Lianhua AMA, on the right of the screen. And in 2006, we launched the project Future Dreams to talk about, discuss with AMAs what they would like to do if they have, in that moment, they have any plans. So this project lasts 2 to 3 years, and AMA discuss with our social workers and to decide what kind of roles, identity, what kind of career, what kind of job they would like to try, like to do. For example, there is a flight attendant. The AMA played a flight attendant not because she would like to serve someone, but because in that time she believed that who is able to be a flight attendant because she is expert, and she is marginalized and is a professionalized individual, that she has power to do so. So she would like to be a flight attendant. So we talk about the flight company to can we have a chance to do so? Yeah. Okay, and next I will talk about taken into the court. And I will start with the Women's International War Crime Tribunal and Japan military sexual slavery in 2000. So next year, 2020, will be the 20th anniversary of this historical event. And this tribunal is a simulate court, and it started with civil society, and it made it possible for civil society to attend to a part of the crucial roles to in the court and to against the nation-facilitated sexual violence. And also, there is a public hearing on crimes against women in wars and conflict. And in that public hearing, 16 women gave testimony about the violations they have suffered in different regions of the world. And 12 Taiwanese Ama attended this tribunal, and many supported group and individuals attend as well. In Taiwan, this event raised public awareness, and this event also encouraged Taiwanese Ama. They thought the other countries, other survivors like Korea, Harmony, standing up to testify such a war crime. And this experience attending this tribunal echoed in the following workshop all the time. And demanding justice. This photo was taken when Ama was physically able to attend the protest, and now there are only 2 Amas still alive. So fortunately, in recent years, more and more younger generations attend this campaign in Taiwan. So the core is clear that the Japanese government should acknowledge its role in planning, setting up, and operating the comfort women system, and recognizing the historic fact that women are forced into sexual slavery, and also demanding for the Prime Minister of Japan should offer a formal apology and compensation openly and sincerely to the victim on behalf of the Japanese government. So once we talk about in recent years, younger generation attended the protest, that we found that the protest becomes more diverse. So this protest in front of the Japan-Taiwan Interchange Association in 2006, a performer costumed herself like a statue. And we have one in Tainan. And we run the annual protest event in front of the Japan and Taiwan Interchange Association, demanding for the apology. And also, these protests are connecting our Ama Museum. So in 2017, so we cooperate with an artist. She designed a kind of cards with a Japanese flag and a heart, a red heart. And we invite museum visitors to write down or scratch or draw any opinions or any words they would like to deliver to Japanese government. And we use this material as exhibition. And on that year, August 14, we sent all the messages, all the cards to the Japanese Association. thousands cards are displayed in our museum and sent it to the office. And to show the government, Japanese government, the civil society's voice. And 2018, we launched a sitting protest in front of the association. Oh, 2019. Okay. And in the end, I will introduce briefly about my museum. We have found, oops. Okay. We have technique problem. Okay, sorry. So the Amma Museum was opened in 2016, and the museum is the first museum in Taiwan to dedicate for country women. And our Amma and Harmony Lin Yongzhu attended this opening ceremony. And it's also a first museum run by civil organizations. So we tried very hard to maintain the operation of this place. And this place is so important because we believe that it creates more diverse ways to contact people to talk about the country women issues. So it's an event we hold in the museum. And the last one, last year, we cooperated with Anne Frank House in Netherlands and to present this exhibition. And we try to connect two different women's stories, Anne Frank and Amma, the Jewish teenager girl being captured by Nazi and died in concentration camp, and young women forced into sexual slavery in Japan by Japanese military. And okay, and this group is run by several countries cooperated with a young age to talk about the further information. Sorry. So to the end, in the end, so I will play. Yeah, no, do I have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I will play a short video that shows the, yes, some moment in the workshop. So.
Okay, we wish that all our brave human rights defenders will take what we have already done in the past 25 years and work in the future. live a life until the end of their lives. They wear masks in the society. They do not want to show their real faces, what really happened to them. This is a survivor's recovery, and we honor them in this situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Teresa and Ansel. It was a really rare chance for us to learn about the Taiwanese situation, survivors and the witness of the sexual violence. Thank you again. 아마가 우리 할머니들을 이렇게 일컫는다는 걸 저는 처음 알았네요. 아셨어요? 그죠? 타이완 소식 이렇게 상황은 저희가 처음 접하는 것 같아요. 얼마 전에 그 네덜란드 위안부 할머니, 인도네시아에서 이렇게 계시던 분이 돌아가셨다는 소식은 들은 바 있습니다만 타이완 소식은 정말 오랜만이에요. So next speaker is Father Park Sang-un. He is the director of Jesuit Research Center for Advocacy and Solidarity and serves as chair of Committee of Justice, Peace and Ecology at Superior's Conference of Men Religious in Korea. He is currently doing a research project for Global Compacts on Migrants and Refugees and is developing peace-building programs for the East Asia. So he'll speak about mainly about the Rohingya crisis and solidarity, a Catholic response. Okay.
Yeah, 안녕하세요. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I will talk briefly about the Rohingya crisis and the Catholic Church's response to it. But I will do that a bit broader view of concerns for the refugee and migrant as such. As a Jesuit priest, I feel very pleased that our stories and the struggle around the Rohingya issue can be shared at this moment and at the Jesuit school. So let's begin. We live in disturbed times. There are more people displaced than at any time since the Second World War. Most of these 5 million uprooted people remain within their own countries, but nearly a third, 22 million, had no alternative but to cross the border. When they did, they became refugees. The Rohingya fled mass violence, atrocities, including genocide, sex slavery, torture, rape as a weapon of war, and child abuse. They did not move for gain or pleasure, but because they had no choice. They all live in the Rohingya, a miserable predicament. But migrants and refugees are not an unexpected crisis. Human mobility, which unfortunately and tragically includes many who are forced to flee for a variety of understandable or urgent reasons, is a fact of human life. Not only the Rohingya community, although this crisis calls for emergent responses, criminal justice and reparation, but also refugees, as refugees, need and should be entitled to expect at least three things: rescue, autonomy, and the eventual route out of limbo. Currently, the majority of refugees are not getting any of them, frankly speaking. So the relevant question is that, are governments, international organizations, business, communications, and civil society responding competently and responsibly? I suggest that faith-based organizations are uniquely able to care for refugees and migrants because they employ a holistic, person-centered approach that respects the human dignity of each individual, and they have established networks throughout the world. And certainly any religion is not a substitute at all, but it gives us something broader in view. As a member of the Catholic community, among the innumerable faith-based traditions, I just pick up one, which is the most familiar to me, Catholic one. As a core figure and the prophetic voice of the current Catholic Church, Pope Francis has urged the Church to accompany all people who are compelled to leave their country. 2 years ago, he established the Migrants and Refugees section, which now is a part of a new dicastery for promoting integral human development at Vatican. This dicastery is a particular term to designate a kind of department in a state. It's Vatican terms. The Catholic Church is concerned with immediate humanitarian needs as well as long-term integral human development. Refugee must be understood as not only a humanitarian issue, but also one of human development. In his statement for 105th World Day of Migrants and Refugees, it will be September this year, choosing its main theme is not just about migrants and refugees. Pope Francis intends to emphasize that his repeated appeals in favor of migrants, refugees, displaced persons, and victims of trafficking must be understood within his deep concern for all inhabitants of the existential peripheries, which he calls it in his document, now is famous, Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel. Here, I think the migrants and the refugees here interchangeable in its practical implications. Please note that this goes against the tendency in society and popular media to ignore them, caricature them, keep them invisible, or make them disappear. Rejecting this rejection, our theme here, it is not just about migrants, stimulate our curiosity, then our concern, then our compassion, and finally, our social, solidarity. Here is some points I want to mention to follow Pope Francis' document. First, it's not just about migrants and refugees. It's also about our fears. The fears we feel in the face of today's challenges are real, but we cannot let them deprive us of the desire and ability to meet the other, and in others to meet the transcendence, the God, in Christian term. And Also, it's not just about migrants and refugees. It's also about charity, love. Today, our migrant refugee brothers and sisters offer us the opportunity to live the highest level of charity, that which is practiced towards those who are unable to reciprocate and perhaps even to thank us. And it's not just about refugees and migrants, it's also about our humanity. The encounter with the other and with our neighbor needs offers us the opportunity to restore the humanity of others, to grow in our own humanity, and to contribute to building up a true human family. So it's not just about migrants and refugees. It's also about not excluding anyone. The little ones, the poor, the most vulnerable, and are those who pay the price of wars, injustice, and exclusive development. We are called instead to include everyone in our journey of global growth so that everyone has access to integral human development. Global refugee crisis is a major challenge for much of today's world and real priority for the Catholic Church now. The Church never forgets the victims. The Pope repeatedly shows his deep compassion for all who are displaced and calls for migrants and refugees for embrace. So he said, our shared response may be articulated by 4 verbs. First, to welcome, to protect, to promote, and to integrate migrants and refugees. And the great religious traditions all emphasize the dignity of each human person and the unity and the common destiny of the entire human race in our common home. Accordingly, each faith calls upon individuals and communities to welcome, assist, and protect the refugees, migrants, and the displaced in our midst. 2 years ago, Pope Francis met 16 representatives of the Rohingya community and there said, let us not close our heart or look the other way. The presence of God today is also called Rohingya. So we can witness deep amazement at the human person's worth and dignity, can make sense of our robust sense of humanity, and we can encourage each other to the way of liberation. So let me finish this brief presentation by watching the Pope Francis short video clip.
Le migrazioni nelle loro diverse forme non rappresentano certo un fenomeno nuovo nella storia dell'umanità. Esse hanno marcato profondamente ogni epoca, favorendo l'incontro dei popoli e la nascita di nuove civiltà. Purtroppo in gran parte dei casi si tratta di spostamenti forzati causati da conflitti, disastri naturali, persecuzioni, cambiamenti climatici, violenze, povertà estrema e condizioni di vita indegne. La nostra comune risposta si potrebbe articolare attorno a 4 verbi: accogliere, proteggere, promuovere e integrare. Accogliere. Un'accoglienza responsabile e dignitosa di questi nostri fratelli e sorelle comincia dalla loro prima sistemazione in spazi adeguati e decorosi. Proteggere. Parliamo di milioni di lavoratori e lavoratrici migranti e tra questi particolarmente quelli in situazione irregolare, di profughi e richiedenti asilo, di vittime della tratta. La difesa dei loro diritti inalienabili, la garanzia delle libertà fondamentali e il rispetto della loro dignità sono compiti da cui nessuno si può esimere. Promuovere. Proteggere non basta, occorre promuovere lo sviluppo umano integrale di migranti, profughi e rifugiati. La promozione umana dei migranti e delle loro famiglie comincia dalle comunità di origine. Là deve essere garantito, assieme al diritto di poter migrare, anche il diritto di non dover migrare. Integrare. L'integrazione, che non è né assimilazione né incorporazione, è un processo bidirezionale che si fonda essenzialmente sul mutuo riconoscimento della ricchezza culturale dell'altro. Credo che coniugare questi 4 verbi in prima persona singolare e in prima persona plurale rappresenti oggi un dovere.
Okay. Thank you, Father Bach. So it was a very precious presentation about the Catholic perspective regarding the Rohingya crisis. Okay. 저희 한국 전쟁 때 수많은 난민들이 발생했습니다만 지금 로힝야만 해도 이게 1000명도 아니고 100명도 10,000명도 아니고 10만 명도 아니고 100만을 넘는다고 합니다. 정말 자꾸 이렇게 마음이 더 무거워지는데요. 그렇기 때문에 또 우리가 지금 이 국제 컨퍼런스를 열고 있겠죠. 시간이 없는 관계로 질문은 2분 정도 받고 끝내도록 하겠습니다. Would you identify yourself?
Thank you for the presentations and the video from Pope Francis. It's very inspiring. My name is Minju. I previously worked at the World Bank in the Education Department, and I'm beginning my PhD studies at Stanford University in the US in international education. Given my background in education, I'm very much interested in your views on the role of education and peace building and being a support system for refugee children and women who are often the victims of sexual violence, particularly when they migrate to a new country. They face cultural, linguistic, social struggles that hinder their ability to learn and fully achieve their potential. I'm very interested in hearing your views on the role of the public education system in successfully integrating them into the society, and how NGOs and civil society organizations can work together with the government to provide a holistic education for refugee children and women and other minority groups. Thank you.
Okay. So 한 분만 더 받을게요. Another.
So I guess I'll answer this not so much from my perspective as a Burmese person in solidarity, but from my own day job in the United States, which is doing civil rights enforcement for public school students in the New York State school system. And so in that capacity, I work with a lot of refugee children and teenagers from different ethnic communities, including the Rohingya and other from Burma, as well as Somalia, Nepal, and so forth. And I think that the partnership between NGOs and the government, if you have a government that's benign and helpful, can be very, very helpful. My specific job is I do civil rights enforcement to ensure that refugee and other immigrant children are able to go to school. But the way that I learn about those cases, because those people don't necessarily know that my office is available, is through NGOs, through immigration lawyers, through refugee resettlement agencies, and the service providers every day. So I think that it's a critical issue. This is, of course, in the context of third-party resettlement, but it's a critical issue there. And I think in the camps, certainly, as we were talking about in one of the prior panels, the need to have a livelihood for youth in the camps, a way forward, not only for their education in the future, but for something to do and be occupied in the camps. I think there are other people here that know much more about the conditions in the camps than I do, but I know that getting education in the formal education. My understanding is there's informal education happening in the camps, but having formal education in Burmese and English, as well as Rohingya, is really critical.
If I may say something about education and its role in our recovery process with the Amas, I would like to start with a quote from one of the Amas. She said, "My life ended the day I realized that I am a comfort woman." We believe at our organization, we are a service organization, we believe that education is about to solicit what's inside of you, trying to regain the agency of your lives, trying to steel yourself through the daily life facing the society. This is what we do at our organization, trying not to integrate them back into the society, but to accept themselves and celebrate what they can do for the society as a whole. They, as role models, they demonstrate their bravery, demonstrate their protesting energy toward a government which used to govern the Taiwan Island. This is what we do at the Taipei Women's Rescue Foundation. Thank you.
네, 이게 생생한 그 활동 경험에서 나온 그 반응에 대해서 감사하게 생각합니다. 그냥 시간상 여기서 끝내도록 하겠습니다. 다음 세션으로 넘어가죠. 감사합니다.
Many thanks to the moderator and the speakers.